Hey, welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. I'm a little bit crazy looking here because I've got some sunlight coming through the windows. Today there was a meeting, Jackson Hole, Wyoming Federal Reserve, and one of the guys, one of the leading lights there, decided to give a speech. Jerome Powell. So you'll remember a month and a half, maybe ago, his colleague in San Francisco, she said that she wasn't noticing the effects of inflation. She didn't notice any problems with inflation. No problems, gas is a little expensive, but she can deal with it. She's set up, she doesn't have any concerns. She also has a paycheck from the Federal Reserve of like $400,000 a year, $340, whatever. She makes a lot of money every year. And, so she's in the class of people who's not being really affected. She's not super rich. She's not making $2 million a year. But if you're making more than $250,000 a year, inflation's not really pissing you off all that much, okay? You might notice a few things. You might not, So just this is the people we're talking about. So Jerome Powell comes up and he talks about how the Fed's going to raise the rates again and how they're doing this even though they know, I've got my phone here just in case, that it's the burdens of high inflation fall heaviest on those who are least able to bear them, so we need to help control that by hurting them, literally hurting them, to get price stability, okay? And he quite simply says that it's going to hurt families and businesses. Direct quote, families and businesses. And so, they're going to raise the rate. They're going to keep raising the rates. They've got a plan to raise it at least 2 more times, blah, blah, blah. The Dow goes down 1,000 points or more. I never saw the close. Gold is down, silver's down. Oh my God, the economy's collapsing. Except that this is the same thing that happens every single time, which is wealth transfer. Obama oversaw the largest wealth transfer in history up to that point, more people joined the 1%, so to speak. More people in I don't know how to describe it, it expanded, okay? Poor people got poorer, middle class people got poorer, the rich people got richer and more powerful. Transfer of wealth. And then the pandemic came along, and as much as you may hate Trump, and we'll talk about that later, because I got to talk about Satan himself later when it comes to politics and elections. As I think, as much as you may hate him, that he actually tried to stop some of the global transfer of wealth, but we had a global transfer of wealth that happened over the pandemic, and it got worse, much worse. They even came out with their plan to make it even worse. We all joke about Klaus Schwab, but they're saying it out loud, right? So this happens, and everything, the stock market's tanking. That doesn't hurt them. It hurts you, okay? But it doesn't hurt them. It hurts retirement funds. It hurts people in the median 20, 60% percentiles. Okay, it doesn't hurt people in the top 5%. It doesn't hurt people in the top 10% of our population. What they do is they buy. They're like, woo, everything tumbled. Buy. That's what you do. Today would have been a fantastic day to just take cash reserves and go into the Dow. It might go down a little bit more, but it's going to go up. It's going to go up. It's going to go up later on. Wealth transfer. That's what's going on. That's what this is. Okay? Why now? Well, okay, so there's a couple things going on here. We got 3 main forks in this video. It's going to be a long video, and I apologize. And it's not an enlightenment video, in case you've already figured that out, or haven't already figured that out. So this is kind of a weird one. But we got to talk about elections. We have to talk about the economics. And we're going to have to, let's get into this. The inflation problem that we're having is a policy problem. It's not a money printing problem primarily. That money printing thing happened a long time ago. The more recent stimulus packages, the more recent stimulus money has been more along the lines of the child tax credit, where instead of spending having the child tax credit at your refund, where you get, you know, a $4,000, a $6,000, $8,000 refund. This is real for people with 3 or 4 kids. This happens. Instead of getting that refund and buying a new refrigerator or making major repairs to the car, capital purchases, major purchases, what you're doing is you're getting a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there. You're buying fancier groceries. No one's starving. So you're buying fancier groceries. You're buying clothing. You're doing consumer activity with this. Normal consumer activity. So that's propping up the economy artificially, but it's not actually dumping extra money into the economy in the same fashion that giving out actual incentive checks is. Because this is money you would have gotten anyway, they're just spreading it out a little bit so that you're more likely to take on consumer debt, because that actually happens. You spread it out like that, well, you can afford, you've got this coming in, you can afford this payment, you do more consumer debt, and more low-end basic consumerism. Consumer activity drives our economy. This is global and the US. We are a consumer-based economy. It does not have to be that way. You can be an investment-based economy. There's all sorts of different ways to do this. But our economic engine is consumption. And you have to keep that consumption going one way or another, even when things don't look right, even when the population's crashing, even when the economy's crashing, whatever. So you have to play games to do that to get that to happen, and this is one of the games that they play, but it doesn't actually add anything to the economy in terms of money, real money. So it's not the actual cause of inflation. If anything, it's a tricky game, and we're going to get into that with the student loan stuff. The student loan debt forgiveness is all predicated on your tax records. Just like these stimulus things are predicated on your tax filing and stuff. There's a thing there. There's a very scary thing there. That's the third fork that we're going to talk about, social credit systems. Big deal. Big, awful deal. But what does it do when you take away part of someone's student debt? Well, it gives you greater ability to take on additional consumer debt and engage in consumer activities. That's what it is. More subscriptions, more high-fee credit cards, more consumer debt. It's not about buying a house. If it is, it's about qualifying for a loan because your debt-to-income ratio. So maybe, but that's still debt. You're still taking on more debt. That's the whole point here. It's mostly about generating consumer activity. Just think about it that way for a moment, and we'll come back to this. So why now? Why is the Fed doing this now here at the end of August? Well, they passed their Green New Deal, whatever they want to call it, Build Back Better, Inflation Reduction Act, which they dropped because everyone knows it's not working the way it's not going to be that. The Green Climate Change Deal Act, whatever they're calling it this week. They passed this big, huge thing that's going to totally fuck us. They're hoping that the effects won't be noticed until February or March, possibly April next year. And there's some reason to think that a lot of the effects won't hit until next year. Some of them might hit early, and that's a scary thought for them because of the election. But they're trying to push it past the election, not only past the election, but past the January transfer of power, okay? New governors, new senators, new representatives come in January. Everything tanks, or the side effects of the Green New Deal hit, and everyone's like, oh shit, you know, inflation goes up, unemployment goes up, people can't drive their cars, you know, dogs and cats living together, right? Whatever the badness is, they can blame it on the Republicans because the odds are pretty good that there's going to be a shift in congressional power come January. And if not, they'll just spin it away because they have the media, right? So that's the goal. That's why it's all here. That's probably why it got stalled in the first place, is to make sure that the downstream effects hit after election season, but also after office change season. Okay, you know, if 5 governorships go Republican instead of Democrat, it changes the whole country, right? It does actually matter, and it's looking pretty bad for the blue right now. You know, backing the blue is not a good bet in Vegas. I made a joke. So they're pushing that downstream. At the same time, they're doing the announcement of the rates going up right now because they don't want to pound that into an October surprise. They want to do it now. All the effects, everything gets done now so that people are used to it so that it doesn't hit them in the ass in November or October campaign season. So notice the gas prices. They've done the same thing with the gas prices. We are just, 5-6 weeks away from $6 a gallon. We were flirting with $6 a gallon here, and I'm not in California, okay? I'm not in Oklahoma. Never got that bad in Oklahoma, but I'm not in California. And now, it's back down to the point where if I look, I'm paying between $3.85 and $4.10, $4.15 a gallon. I have to go look for $3.77.9 is one gas station in cash I know I can go get with all the discounts and everything. Generally speaking, I'm looking at about $4 a gallon right now. As much as $4.10 depends on where you go. $3.999 is $4 a gallon. $3.99.9. That's an archaic artifact of an older day when we had pennies meant something and dimes were made of silver and stuff like that. I don't get into the precious metal currencies with me. Just it's a thing. All right. So now they've got the gas prices down to the point where probably it's going to not be the biggest pain issue come the election season. People are going to be like, well, why are you complaining about $3.75 gas, man? It's not that bad. They're doing okay. They're getting the prices down. They're not going to acknowledge that it was, the people who were paying $3.75 in September, October coming up here were paying $1.75 3 years ago, So they're trying to get the badness now so that it looks less bad later. You get used to the really, really crappy stuff, and then the halfway crappy stuff doesn't look quite as bad, all right? That's the point I'm trying to make. So that's the timing. And it's the election issue because they really, the globalists and the Fed and everyone, they don't care about the election so much. They care about the power, the transfer of wealth, the social credit system, and the ability to increase consumer activity through non-ownership, the wealth transfer of wealth. We'll get into that a little more here. We're still on elections. They don't care about the elections that much. They don't like or dislike Joe Biden. He's a bit player. I mean, come on. The dude gets $90,000 bribes out of Ukraine. Ukraine is the center for money laundering and corruption for all of the elite power players in Europe and the US, okay? Big black market, whatever, tax evasion, anything you want, Ukraine. And people are like, oh, but Hunter Biden sat on the board of Burisma, $50,000. I'm like, he's not getting $500 million. The Bidens are bit players, okay? The fact that you can bribe someone who supposedly is the president of the United States for less than $100,000 is unbelievably horrible. I mean, dude, there are drug cartel dudes who make more money than this, pay more money than this in bribes. So yeah, this isn't actually a great thing for the Bidens here. But we know, anyone who's looked, we know Ukraine has major corruption issues. It's one, probably one of the reasons that everyone went for the low-key Biden candidacy in the first place is because that was an easy one to keep the Ukraine thing going, and then the war, they're stupid. They keep thinking things are going to happen in their bubbles that don't happen. And that brings us back again to the election. So, get the bad stuff over now. Then they're going to gin up an October surprise. It's probably going to be Trump. Okay? And there's a reason for that. They're probably going to come up with something Trump in October. And they're leading you on and leaving it out. And they're, dangling the search warrant and the FBI raid and the January 6th hearings. They're dangling this all out. But here's the thing. They don't have anything to do. Americans have had to become relatively economically literate in the past decade. It's part of politics, it's part of your job, it's part of daily life. You have to, there's so many scams, so many details on the internet just to buy something online, anywhere except Amazon, and even sometimes on Amazon, you have to gain a certain kind of economic literacy. You have to be able to read between lines. You have to do comparison shopping over months. You have to develop a set of language and skill sets. A set of language abilities and skills to navigate the economics. So it's not as easy to just fool people with, oh yeah, well, gas is cheaper than it was last week. You don't remember last month, because people do remember last month, because people are keeping track of how much stuff costs and what they're going to buy next and when the delivery date is on their scheduled shipments, and people are doing this stuff. So there's a lot of people banking on economic illiteracy or short-term memory, midterm memory loss for the elections. They know they're doing bad, okay? The Democrats are looking pretty bad for November, so they need to come up with some kind of October surprise. And they think, because you can't go after 10 governorships, 300 House seats. You can't go after everything individually all at once the way that would make sense. So you have to have a nationally unifying message for an October surprise. And the only thing they have, well, they don't have anything, but the only thing they can come up with is Trump. And it doesn't matter, like, literally does not matter. It doesn't matter if he's running for president, not running for president. It doesn't matter if he's dead tomorrow somehow from a heart attack. They're going to try to use Trump to make all Republicans evil so you don't vote Republican. It's not working. It hasn't been working for months. It hasn't been working since 2015. I'm not going to talk about the 2020 election, but I will say that it was not a normal election, and the results, what you take out of the data from the election, considering the media and what the media did with reporting on Trump for the previous 5 years, you be careful what you take out of the election as far as data and conclusions. They haven't done a good job using Trump as the centerpiece of all Republicans are evil over the last 5 years. It's not working very well. It didn't work in Virginia for sure. It hasn't worked in Florida. It's not going well for them. So the October surprise is probably going to be Trump. They're going to hope everyone forgets about this. Today's announcement from the Fed, the economy, inflation, gas prices, they're housing. Oh my God, housing. They're hoping you're going to forget about this because they're going to come up with some Trump story. It's not going to work because for a lot of people, increasingly, Trump is becoming a symbol of the government is screwing with you. Not because he's doing anything good or bad or is a person or anything. Like, the best thing he can do for the Trump movement right now is die. And that's just, like, if he was dead or in jail or something, then everything becomes more powerful. It's the martyr effect, right? Running for president is a distant third option for him. But attacking Trump doesn't make it less likely that people are going to vote Republican at this point. It makes it more likely because it's all tied up in the same pile of crap, the economy, and I don't think people are going to forget about the economy. So this is one of the things, one of the reasons they're doing this now is the election. No, I don't think the board of the Federal Reserve or the Davos elites or the globalists care at all about Biden and the Democratic Party in the elections. Not at all. They care about what the outcome does for them, and they're moving forward with globalist plans, and they don't want them hindered. Okay? Transfer of wealth, transfer of wealth, transfer of wealth. And if the elections get really, really out of control, they could lose a lot of ground. Okay, it's still possible for people to fight back. So they're agreeing to the timing. They're managing the timing. I think they're fooling themselves. I don't think they know. I think that they've got an October surprise planned that's going to not work for them. And even if the October surprise is a new world war, all the more reason to start putting some Republican veterans in the government instead of these people. Like, I don't think it's going to work for them, no matter what they do. Okay? They can't argue you got to keep Biden in office because of the war, because this isn't a presidential election. It shows a very slim but real chance of becoming a Democrats have no power election. We'll talk about that in another video. So that's what's going on there. Let's go to the rental thing. Okay, consumer activity needs to be promoted to keep the economy going in the current model, and so the separation of wealth from people, okay, the transfer of wealth to the elites continues on. That's what they're doing with this. It's why the Dow is down. The Dow is down so that they can get a wealth transfer. Because if they get you to the point where you can't afford to buy anything significant, they can get consumer activity through subscription. You can't own a refrigerator, but you can rent one. You can subscribe to one. They're doing this with cars now. You subscribe to features. You can't really afford the $80,000 electric car, but you can afford the $40,000 electric car. But that's okay, because what we'll do is we'll give you a subscription to all the features that make it an $80,000 car, and you just pay us a couple $100 a month. You won't notice. Don't worry about it. Nothing, and you don't get anything for it. You don't get to own anything for it. All right. Rental. No home ownership. Rental. They're doing this to us on purpose because they need to generate consumer activity. It's not necessarily one of those good and evil things. Yes, it's taking away the dream of home ownership, and yes, it's taking away independence and all of that stuff that I believe in, but I don't necessarily think they're doing it because they are literally Darth Vader or Emperor Palpatine, although Klaus Schwab really is Emperor Palpatine, so whatever. What it is they need to generate consistent, forever consumer activity. Cradle to grave consumer activity, so they need to have you rent, not own. And that's why this transfer of wealth is happening. The more you transfer the wealth, increase the wealth gap, the less people can be independent with their capital purchases. Now, why do it if everything's going along and the economy is growing? Well, because population is shrinking. We know it's shrinking. It's going to go down. It may not be shrinking yet, but consumer population is not in a high growth space. So to get the consumer activity that drives the economy globally and for the United States and for most of Europe and so on and so forth, you need to have people rent stuff instead of own stuff. If they could rent you the food, they would. Eventually, there'll probably be some models that look like that. Subscription services for your food delivery and everything like that. They need to generate the consumer activity, get rid of farmers markets, so on and so forth. I was at IKEA today, and I looked at their little cafeteria thing, and the changes are insane, and we'll do a video on that later. So that's that part of what's going on. The transfer of wealth is deliberate to try to generate consumer activity, guaranteed consumer activity, to keep the economy going through rents, leases, subscriptions, whatever you want to call it, okay? That's the whole point. Monthly spending, weekly spending, they got to keep the consumer spending, and they can't do it with goods, so they're going to do it with subscription services and rentals. And that leads us to prong number 3 of what's going on here. And it's kind of an off the topic prong, okay? But it's related. Okay, we covered the election timing as part of the reason why the economy is being handled, mismanaged the way it is. They want to try to get a dip around election time where things look kind of good, like the clouds are a little thinner right then. Simple. The wealth transfers and the power transfers and everything is because they need to have you not buy that refrigerator with your tax return. They need to have you rent a refrigerator, so they get the consumer activity on a monthly basis. All right? And that brings us to taxes. In a weird and roundabout way, but in order to get a lot of this to happen, what they have to do is they have to get people to pay taxes, be in the tax system, be on the grid, be fully conforming to everything. Okay, this is the key element here. So you'll notice that a lot of the stimulus stuff was handled through the IRS. IRS is going to send you to your direct deposit. It's all going to happen this way. You don't go through offices. You don't go through state offices, like the state welfare offices, and get your stimulus check. No, you go through the IRS. If you don't do taxes, if you don't have a tax presence, you don't get anything, so on and so forth. Same thing with the child tax credit prepayments. You have to be in the normal tax system. Well, they're doing that with the student loan debt forgiveness plans. It's all going to be based on your tax. Here's the problem, and this is probably the scariest part of the video, and the one I'm going to talk about the least, but you should probably care about this the most, because all of the games they're playing with everything else is whatever. They're going to use the IRS to institute a social credit system in the United States. Whether or not we inevitably have a social credit system is an argument for another day. I would prefer, if we're going to have one, for it to be free market, or at least consensual in some way. The worst possible way to do this, that I can think of, would be anything involving the Department of the Treasury, the IRS, ATF, anything. And that's what we've got. Is it looks like they're going to use the IRS to basically set up a social credit system. You do the taxes, you do all the little things, you do it right, you do it with a scared, pleading look on your face so that you don't get audited, and if you do get audited, you paid so much money that it doesn't matter, because you didn't take any deductions, and you don't want to go through the battle, whatever. Okay, that's fine. But that becomes your social credit system. You don't get benefits, you don't get stimulus. They're going to try to make this so that you have to have a stimulus check every year, eventually every month or 3 months, to stay alive. So you have to be part of the social credit system. And they're using the IRS for this, and it hit me today that this is actually how we're going to get a social credit system in the United States, and it is terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. I can think of no agency worse than the IRS to run a social credit system, institute a social credit system in the United States. Pretty much anything else we can fight against. We can do some sort of constitutional battles with DHS, even ATF, and their Department of Treasury. But the IRS is going to be our social credit system. That hurts. That really hurts. So domestically, that's going to be a really big problem. My hope is that people are going to realize this, that the Generation Z and the millennials are going to look at home ownership fading from view and not say, oh, it's because of evil conservative farmers and Republicans. They're going to look at the globalists and say, you just literally bought every house in my city, so I can't buy one. And then things might vote appropriately, because, hey, the conservatives are going to suck. They're going to be just as authoritarian as anyone else, but at least they believe a little bit in individual action, individual results, individual rewards, and economic independence. So, yeah, maybe they don't want you to dye your hair blue, but at least they want you to have your own checkbook instead of the government having your checkbook. So, there's that. I don't have any good news in this video, obviously, but, that's what we've got. I will talk more about why I think we may end up with a globally dominant conservative American government later, because there's more than one faction to this, and I don't think the wealth transfer globalist thing is actually going to win. But I'll talk about that later. This video is already getting long enough. So here's your high points. The Fed is going to raise rates. The market and the economy and everything crash so that we can do another transfer of wealth to the rich people. All the poor people now have to sell their stocks for below value and blah, blah, blah. Or middle class people. It hits the middle class harder than anyone because they have the basic investments, and their investments are going to end up in the hands of the wealthy. That's how that works. So wealth transfer, which means a better chance of getting consumer activity through drones. This is very Matrix-like. You're literally going to be plugged into machines to power the economy. I mean, that's what they're doing here, right? Timing is basically election cycle, election cycle, election cycle. There's going to be an October surprise. It's going to be Trump because they don't have anything else to go on unless it's a war, and that's not going to help them either. The Trump thing is going to fail miserably. And it's all leading, like, a lot of what they're doing, a lot of the way they're doing things is leading to an IRS-based social credit nightmare. Have a good day.